Wait, what about weird?
Hello, I'm Elena.
And I'm Echo.
And this is our podcast, What About Weird? I'm going to start by asking you a question.
Okay.
What do you think is the most criminal animal out there?
Ooh, a bear.
I didn't actually find anything about bears, but my topic is on criminal animals and animals on trial.
Oh, I love that. I'm surprised that bear's not on there. There's so much footage of bears breaking into homes.
I just wasn't able to find it, and this is all like actual animal trials.
Oh, I love that. Okay.
I wasn't able to find a whole lot of research. Most of it was just the same things, and it was a few sentences of 1305, this pig ate somebody. But I did think it was interesting. And I have a couple examples later on. I'd sectioned mine out with some questions, and then it answered them. So start off with animals on trial. You're probably thinking, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
Nowadays, when we think about, a criminal animal, in quotation marks, we think of a dog bites somebody. The owner is put on trial for the responsibility of that animal. Mm-hmm. But this wasn't always the case. Specifically in medieval Europe is most of where I was able to find information. So historically speaking, the animals, not the owners, were held liable.
Right.
So if a dog were to bite someone and hurt them, then the dog would be put on trial for assault.
Which I don't even understand how that works, because you're like cross-questioning the dog. You're like, why did you bite this person? It's just, yeah, exactly. It's all...
But so like if the animal hurt somebody, a lot of cases were animals destroying property or like hordes of like a bunch of insects eating crops.
Whoa, insects are included?
Yes. Later on, I have something about some beetles that were put on trial. Not the musicians.
Ringo Starr.
Ringo Starr destroyed these crops. But yeah, so a lot of these are about the animal. And there's some great woodcuts online you can find of pigs testifying. And they all just look super confused.
Makes me almost sad.
But because the animals can't argue for themselves, they would often be assigned a lawyer. I'll get into that later.
Okay.
Might be thinking, what's the purpose to all of this? Why are you putting an animal on trial?
Yeah, because it's not like they can pay you money for like repairs or anything. It's an animal.
Yeah, and from what I could find, it's not like sometimes the owner would have to pay fees, but usually it was that wasn't the case. You didn't have to pay for damages because, how is a chicken gonna pay you for damages?
Right, he doesn't even pay rent.
Yeah. I wish my chickens paid rent.
Yeah, really.
But so the purpose of this was to make the government look like they're doing stuff and to give people closure. So if in the case of animals destroying crops, you can't just be like, well, they're bugs, we can't do anything. People are going to demand, like, try and get rid of all of them, do this, do that, whatever.
Right.
Some cases where animals are convicted of, like, witchcraft, they have to be seen to be doing something. Like, the government has to have done something. Or in the cases where animals have accidentally killed people, to give the family closure, and also so that animal wouldn't kill again.
Interesting.
So let me read this quote I pulled from an article from the Library of Congress. Animals have historically been treated as partial legal persons to allow the legal system to respond to unpredictable and sometimes fatal harms they've caused. It's a way to show being responsive.
So partial legal persons, meaning they weren't considered like a full human being legally?
Yes. From what I understood, yes. And because they couldn't testify for themselves. I don't know the ins and outs of medieval law, but you can't have a pig be like, no, I didn't murder that person. If the pig says that, then you're going to put him on trial for witchcraft. so right. Either way, they'd have a lawyer gather evidence and be like, my client did not murder that boy. Do you have anything to say for yourself? And the pig just sits there, So this was primarily common in southwestern Europe, so France, Spain, Italy, and Portugal usually, but some Nordic and Scandinavian countries as well come up. It was predominantly those. And places like the US later on would charge the people instead of the animals, like the owners of the animals,
Right.
as basically like, well, it's an animal. Mm-hmm. Your cow killed Uncle Billy. Why don't you have a better handle on your cow? Like, we're charging you for neglect. Mm-hmm. But that was later on. But despite this, like, I'm talking later on, animals were still often put to death if, you know, it killed somebody.
Right.
Which is still, still see that a lot, like with killer bears and stuff. Mm-hmm. They tend to be put down because it becomes a habit.
Right.
And we'll still a lot of times put down animals, even though they're not put on trial. Like I said, it's often the owner, or
right.
if in the case of wild animal like a bear, you know, well, this bear killed somebody, it's our responsibility as the National Park Service to put this animal down or what have you.
Oh my god, it's Harambe all over again. Do you remember Harambe?
Would have looked great in a suit and tie. As I just mentioned, this stopped becoming as big of a thing around like the 19th, 20th century because, like I said, it was seen more as the owner's responsibility.
Right.
And if it was a wild animal, it would just be like, we're just going to shoot it. Because they weren't seen as holding human, they didn't have like a human moral compass, so they didn't understand morals, so you couldn't, by that definition, you couldn't hold an animal. Again, I don't know the ins and outs of the legal system. That's a lot too much Latin for me.
Yeah, really.
It was predominantly a thing in like 13th to 15th century.
Okay, so a
in
long
Europe.
time ago.
Yeah, so this is mostly a medieval thing. And like I said, to make the government look like they're doing stuff and to give people closure.
Right, because we didn't have like pesticides back then to spray on the bugs or, you know.
Yeah, what are you going to do? Find every little cricket and put them in a tiny little guillotine?
Yeah.
You know?
Really.
So after an animal was considered to be a criminal or was arrested, a lot of these would follow a similar, you know, legal process to a person. Mm-hmm. They'd be brought into court, and like I had said earlier, they would be given a lawyer because they can't speak for themselves. But in some cases of like where it's a horde of animals, an infestation, they would send them a letter of cease and desist. I'm not even joking. They would send
the animal the letter.
Yes.
Like telling them like stop doing this behavior?
Yes. Because they can read, but they can't testify against themselves in court.
It's so goofy. I also wonder, like, did they have handcuffs back then? Were they just tying rope? Like,
I mean, you have like shackles and stuff. Some of the woodcuts that I found were putting animals in shackles or like tying them up, putting them in cages. I don't know what you do in the case of like crickets. Maybe just put them in a jar or like locusts.
Yeah, right.
Or the beetles, like.
You gotta punch a hole in the top because you don't want them to die during trial.
Yeah, you cover your hand up over it when it's time for them to, sorry, you're too criminal, we can't let you live. But so there were some letters of cease and desist. If they didn't cease and desist, which was rarely the case.
Yeah.
They would then be summoned to court. In the event they didn't come to court, they would have someone be put in their stead. You know, like you can't get a bunch of insects to come to court or a horde of rats. If it were, you know, one pig tearing up a field, you could catch that one pig and bring it into court.
Right.
But so they would often set out a lawyer. Absentee lawyer? There's a specific term, I don't remember what it is.
That would make sense to me.
Something along those lines.
That sounds right.
But then they would present the evidence, like in a normal human trial.
Right.
And then decide the verdict and go from there. And a lot of times this would result in some form of punishment, like, oh, this animal has to be put through physical labor. That's their punishment. But a lot of times it was banishment or being put to death.
Mm-hmm. So what happens when they banish you? Like, do you just go out of the county? They put you out in the woods? Like, what happens?
It would depend on if you're being banished from the country or the town, but normally they just in some way find a way to drive either the animal or the hordes of animals out. So if it's one animal, you just, you know, throw it in a cart, drive it out into the woods, drop it off. You know, if anybody sees this animal back in town, then you're allowed to kill him type thing.
That They, like, put up wanted posters. They're like, if you've seen Peppa Pig.
Not Peppa Pig! Peppa Pig wanted for murder.
Exactly.
And so you might be wondering the same thing I was. How the hell do you hang a pig?
Oh,
They got no neck.
Just like their head slides through the news.
Yeah, so that's what I was trying to figure this out. I think I'm on some sort of animal abuse watch list now for looking up, like, how do you hang a pig? Because a lot of these animals were hung. It didn't say,
Wow.
we're just killed. It said, we're hung.
Yeah, like you
Because
would think
that's
it'd
what
be
you would do to a
they would
person.
just get butchered or something, like
Yeah,
at
or
the
would-
butchers, but
Yeah, or cut their head off or something.
yeah.
But apparently what they would often do for animals like pigs or other animals that don't really have a defined neck is they'd hang them by their feet. Like,
Oh, and then just let like the blood rush to their head. That's so sad to me. What a horrible
but
death.
because of the legal procedures, the official way to kill people was usually hanging.
Yeah.
So they had to they were trying to follow normal court procedure and
Right.
like legal procedure and had to hang these animals. So let's get into just a couple of stories I have here. In December of 1457, in Savillon, France, a female pig ended up becoming violent, and she had no self-respect because she did this in front of her piglets.
Whoa. Probably because she was protecting them, right? Like, okay.
That is unknown. I couldn't find anything about that. What I had found was that they'd come across this sow and her piglets all covered in blood by this dead body.
Oh, whoa.
So it's slightly unsure if she killed this boy or not, but because she was covered in blood, circumstantial evidence.
Oh,
You
no.
know, it's the 1450s.
I feel like she was framed. Single mother. That's messed up.
But so they caught her and arrested her and the piglets. They ended up releasing the piglets since they considered them juveniles and could not stand trial. They're
Yeah.
basically babies, and they were just there. So they proceeded to just put the mother on trial, and the owner of the pig was also accused of neglect, but was not held liable, but was accused of neglect for letting his pig get out.
So were they like assessing wounds back then? They could tell like wounds were made in a certain way, because that would
Probably.
say to me that they would know more about what happened. Because obviously, if you have like a stab wound, you're not going to accuse a pig of it, right? Because like
I don't know. Maybe that pig has a knife. Maybe the pig has a knife. You don't know. Pigs are unpredictable. They're violent. You don't know. But so the victim was a 5-year-old boy.
Oh dang!
And you're probably right. What had happened was that the sow was protecting her piglets.
Right.
I would be interested to see if I could find anything. It probably had like maybe he had already died, and pigs will eat a lot of things.
This is the 1400s, though. Is really the kid could have died of anything. Like he could have had a myriad of diseases back then, like that we don't know about, and he could have just
came down
died.
with a severe case of murderous hog. He could have had a stab wound, but maybe the pigs had eaten through it.
Yeah,
And he wasn't
literally
actually
anything could happen to
or
him.
he choked to death on a peanut. A peanut.
He was allergic, but people didn't know about that back then.
Yeah, he just thought he was a witch.
Oh man, now I'm starting to feel really bad for this pig because I feel like they definitely didn't do it.
Oh yeah, you'll get a lot of these. You'll start feeling bad for the animals.
Oh no.
It's unhinged, but I kind of the whole time I'm just like, these poor animals.
Yeah.
These poor animals. But it's just hilariously unhinged and funny to think about. So the pig was accused of the murder of this boy.
Yeah.
And was sentenced to death. Like I said, the piglets escaped being charged because they were considered to just have been wrong place, wrong time, just following their mother.
Wow.
But so that pig was sentenced to death and hung. About 20 years later, in 1474, in Switzerland, a rooster was thought to have laid an egg, which
Well, okay, so that's
just that alone tells you everything you need to know about this case. But
oh god.
so, given that roosters aren't known for laying eggs, they were like, it has to be a witch. This rooster's a witch.
That was the consensus?
Because it was considered if a rooster laid an egg, it would hatch into a cockatrice, which is a foul, evil, magical animal, and they couldn't have this demonic chicken running around, basically.
Wow.
So they put, for laying an egg, which was probably just a rooster in the, like, sitting down near a nest.
Yeah, like, it probably didn't actually lay the egg, obviously.
Or someone didn't, which, you know, if you're raising chickens, you probably know what a rooster looked like, but maybe someone didn't know what a rooster looked like. But...
That's wild.
So they accused it of... Oh, I also wrote it could have... Some sources I found said that the egg could have hatched into a basilisk.
Because that happens.
Yeah. It happens to the best of us. You know, it just happens.
Sometimes when I'm cracking eggs into the pot, a basilisk just comes out and I'm like, oh shit, not again.
Damn it, here we go again.
Extra protein, I guess.
I hate having to descale these things. I was trying to go vegetarian. But so the chicken was executed for witchcraft. I could not find what happened to this egg. I'm assuming maybe they turned it into an omelet or just like...
Yeah, or like, I don't know, like burned the egg, like threw it into a fire.
You wouldn't keep an egg that you believe is going to turn into a like bad magical creature. But I'm just going to say someone turned it into an omelet.
So maybe this is just a normal egg.
So we might have just put a chicken to death for nothing, but nobody needs to know. Nobody needs to know.
Gary was thinking that they only accused people of being witches, especially women, but no.
There were a lot of cases of animals being put on trial. A lot of cases of chickens. I'm assuming a lot of them got executed. But yeah, no, there were a lot of cats, a lot of chickens, and a lot of pigs that were accused of witchcraft.
So, is this because they think this animal is actually capable of witchcraft, or do they believe it's a witch in the form of an animal?
It depended on the case, but a lot of times it was like a witch's familiar or was being affected by witchcraft.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense to me.
I don't know if they tried to find the witch connected to it later on,
right,
or not, but that's just what I could find. A lot of times with like cats and ravens and stuff, they're like, that is a witch. That is a witch in the form of an animal.
Right.
We must kill it. Mm-hmm. We cannot have witches being all witchy and debaucherous in our town. Not in my good town.
Not in this good Christian nation.
They're sullying the name of my town with their meowing at all hours of the night. So the last case I have here is the beetles that I'd mentioned.
Right.
I couldn't find an exact date. I could just find that it was in the 16th century. But a plague of insects were, nothing new by then.
Yeah, like that happened all the time back then.
Happens all the time. But the Catholic Church in this case decided to be extraordinarily creative and send a cease and desist letter. How I had said earlier. But beetles being beetles, not able to read, did not cease and desist.
So why didn't we do this, when we had all these, like, locusts in North Carolina? Why didn't we think of that? We could have just told them to stop.
It's because our education system sucks and they can't read.
Dang it. North Carolina again. Come on.
Be better.
Locusts need better schools, all right?
They need better schools so we can send them cease and desist letters. But the beetles were wreaking havoc in Switzerland. And then this happened also later on in the same century in Germany. Mm-hmm. They did the same thing because I guess it worked, or they wanted to see if it would work the second time. I don't know.
How did it work? So they sent the cease and desist, and then the season for that insects was just over, and so they were gone, and then they thought it was because they sent the cease and desist?
Well, that's...
What?
Yeah, I am unsure, but they did it again later on in the century.
Okay.
So take that for what you will. But for this case, the earlier case in Switzerland, again, because beetles can't read, they did not cease and desist, wreaking havoc on this small town in Switzerland. They tried summoning them to court, but decided against it because the court took pity on them for just being so small and tiny. I'm not even joking. That's what all the sources I found. The church took pity on them for being so small. However, they did bring a lawyer, an absentee lawyer, or what have you, to court.
Whoever's charging them then has to, like, pay the lawyer fees, right?
I'm assuming, or maybe it's just a court-appointed lawyer. Like, for people that are, oh, you can't afford a lawyer, we just have this guy on our payroll who will defend you.
Yeah, they're still, like, paying for him, though, so then it just seems goofy to me, because I'm like, then aren't you just spending, like, money that you don't need to spend, because you're hiring a lawyer for literal bugs?
Like I said, the government needs to be seen doing stuff. Nothing's changed.
No, really, they're like, hey, we're going to be effective in the least effective way. So it looks like we're doing stuff, but we're really not.
We're doing stuff. Trust us, we're doing stuff. We sent a letter of cease and desist. But they did grant these beetles a lawyer, because, like, we need to do something.
Yeah.
And they attempted to sue these insects. I don't know how you sue a bunch of beetles, but they sued them because they couldn't put them to death, and because they, like I said, they'd taken pity on them for being so small. And I'm not sure if that money was ever paid out, how it got paid out, or if it was just we're going through the motions to make you know that we're doing stuff. But, so a bunch of beetles were sued, and not the band.
I mean, they would have had more money to give, so that's weird.
But, so that's everything I have for animals on trial that I could find.
That's so crazy. So it really didn't happen really after that period of time?
Not really, no. It was, like I said, about 16th century is when it stopped, and it started switching over to the animals being, like, the owners of the animals being put on trial for responsibility, due to, like, animals not understanding human morality. And I'm assuming pesticides probably started. We can look this up right quick.
Well, I also want to know, like, when did the witch trials end? Because if the witch trials ended way after that, it would confuse me a little bit to think that no animals were put on trial when we were still, like, doing witchcraft trials, because they always thought that, like, witches could turn into animals and shit, so.
Yeah, there's a million stories of, well, we saw this strangely looking animal, you know, it had a spot in the middle of its forehead. It must have been an eye from the witch watching you.
Yeah. I guess they just always tried to, like, they were accusing these women of, oh, I saw you turn into a cat the other day, but they always wait until she's in her human form to try her instead of catching her in cat form or something.
Yeah. I don't know when exactly the witch craze stopped. I know that a lot of witchcraft laws they just stopped using them, but they didn't officially repeal them until, like, the middle of the last century, beginning of this one. In North Carolina, the witchcraft laws weren't repealed until 2004.
Whoa, that's really late.
Yeah, I might do an episode on, like, witchcraft laws and people accused of witchcraft. I think it was something similar in England, where a lot of these, they were just like, these are there's a lot of weird laws that nobody considers anymore that aren't necessary.
Right.
Because they don't bother updating, because there's not, you know, we don't accuse people of witchcraft anymore. We fell out of that, so they never saw the need to repeal the law.
But it's scary that it's still there, because you could, like, up until 2004, you still technically could have been accused of witchcraft, which is not great.
Yeah.
Oof. That's uncomfortable.
Wild to think that us as little tiny babies could have been accused of witchcraft.
I almost wonder if we still had animal trials today instead of just, you know, like, automatically putting down animals, if that would make the situation any better, or if it would make it worse, if they had some sort of representation saying, like, hey, here's why we shouldn't kill it, instead of, you know, automatically just doing that.
Yeah, I've never had to go through any sort of legal trials involving animals. I know people have gotten, like, bit by dogs really badly. And I know in a lot of those cases the dogs have been put down. I don't know what it would be. Like, I'm not sure the whole process of that. I didn't really look into that, because I was looking at animals themselves being on trial, not
the people.
Not the people, yeah.
I also think it's really interesting that a lot of the animals that were brought up on trial are really chill, kind of harmless animals. It wasn't like they were putting wolves on trial or like sharks or something. Things.
Yeah, I mean, there were some cases of wolves and dogs.
Yeah.
But most of what I found was pigs, cows, horses, insects.
Farm animals.
Like farm animals that you'd have around. Or just like animals existing in the woods.
Interesting.
And like a lot of cases of like rats.
I bet some rats got sued for bringing the plague. I guess they probably didn't know that that's what caused the plague for a long time.
The rats should sue for defamation.
Yeah, really, because now nobody can look at rats the same way. Well, that was really interesting. I did find it fascinating that it kind of occurred in that, basically like in Europe, in that period of time, which kind of says a lot to like the culture at that time.
I do think that is around the same time as like the witch trials craze and stuff. But yeah, so that's, unless you have anything else to add,
No, I don't
think that's about it for this episode.
Always remember
to ask about the weird.
Bye for now.